So I'm back with another oracle card in my Sacred Symbology series. This one's a bit more subtle than the other ones, and I'm kind of liking that because there's a couple of other things I want to talk about in this video that I haven't talked about in the others. The first one is colours and how you choose your colours when you're looking for your signature style and your palette as part of your signature work. And I do think colours can be part of your sacred symbology. Different colours can mean different things. They can give you different feelings. I've talked about in the other videos about how your artwork makes you feel as you're using it, as you're making it. So I think that's another important thing as well. So if you're just starting to sort of figure out your colours and you're not sure what your palette is, when I first started sort of looking into that sort of thing, I found that when I went to buy new art supplies to try out, I paid attention to what colours I chose first, what ones I would reach for. So if there was a new product, I would always reach for a navy blue, would be one of the first colours I would go for. Then olive greens are probably the next one. And then from there, other colours follow on from that. So if you're sort of looking for clues from yourself into what your colours are, your signature colours are, look at your art supplies that you've already got as well. If you've got 16 different blues, you probably really like blue. If there's certain bottles of paint that you go through, every 3 weeks you need a new bottle of a particular paint, and then there's another one you've barely used, again, that's giving you some pretty good clues as well. Also keep in mind that you have like your primary sort of signature palette, but then there's other colours that sort of tend to come back on and off. They're like secondary favourites, I guess. So they're still part of your story as well. So keep that in mind as you're working as well. For me, I really like the dark muted colours, like navies and olives, and even this vintage circus red. But then other colours that tend to come in is pinks. But it's still muted. So the muted level is still there, but the actual colours can change a little bit. I've got friends that work in really bright colours, and I recognise their work as soon as I see it just because it's so bright. And I like to think that my palette's still colourful, even though the colours that I use are sort of darker, more muted colours. So have a little think about that when you're working as well. Look back at your old work and see how often you've used a certain colour. That'll start to inform it as well. Just in case you're wondering, this texture that's on there, that you can see this, that is flexible modelling paste just mixed with black paint. So, and again, I've talked about in the other videos, if you're a card maker, you probably did a lot of border edging with your work just to close your work in, finish it off so that when you look at it, the eye naturally goes this way rather than sort of veering off and it's sort of washing into the background. This sort of pulls it in. And doing this sort of bordering on smaller layered elements tends to bed it into the card so it just doesn't look like it's stuck on. So, but that, again, that's a card maker's technique that's followed through into any of my journaling that I've done, any oracle cards that I've done. So don't leave all your history behind as you're moving forward and changing what you do with your artwork. Take it with you. If you're a scrapbooker, use scrapbook paper in there, but maybe use it in a less traditional scrapbooky way. If you're a mixed media artist, if you've come from card making, you've probably used modelling paste, but you haven't used it this way. So experiment with that sort of thing as well. And the other thing I wanted to talk about with this card was actually the star symbols. So in my other video, I showed you this card, the We Are Familiar card, with the obvious star cutouts that were here. But if you look closely, the map that I used is actually the same map that's on this card, but just with not as much of this used. And if you look really close, the map's actually star constellations. So I know it's very easy when you think of a simple shape, even this part's stars. When you're using a very simple shape like stars, you can think of just the obvious bold shape, but think of using it in mirror reverse, thinking of using it really big, think of using it really tiny. This sort of way is a bit more of a subtle hidden way it's not so blatantly obvious. Do you know what I mean? So if you are feeling drawn to a symbol but you're not quite fully connecting with it, think of all the different ways you can use it, how you can manipulate it, sizes, imagery, all that sort of thing. You'll be surprised how much differently things can look, even though you're technically basing it in the same symbol. I talked in the other video about deers and how easy it was to buy things for deers at Christmas. And then the rabbits is again the same. For me, rabbits in Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland was one of the books that I read over and over when I was a little kid. At bedtime, I actually got banned from being allowed to ask for Alice in Wonderland to be read, because I asked for it to be read basically every single night. And I kind of identify with the White Rabbit a little bit, because I'm very much Capricorn. I hate being late. And the idea of I'm late, rush. But also he's probably not seeing everything. You know, Alice sees it in fresh eyes, whereas he's rushing past everything to get where he needs to go. And I think sometimes I need to, you know, slow down and have a look around rather than just racing to my destination. And on my shrine, let me just lean over here. I've got a few rabbity things. This is my little rabbit vase. I actually bought this at a market when I did a Tracy Verdugo workshop. So much as I love the rabbit, it's also got that memory of that workshop with her. And I also like how shy and sleepy this one is. It's really, really cute. And then the other one I've got, let me just pop, whoops, her over there. Let me put it there. Is these guys, one of my best arty friends gave me these. And they're like little companion good luck bunnies. Aren't they cute? They're actually really, really heavy. So with Easter, you know, if you connected to rabbits, Easter's always a good time to pick up little ornaments and things that go with your symbols. And then obviously Christmas if you're a deer person. So let me just put these out the way so I don't knock them over. So the other thing I want to talk about is if you are a card maker or a scrapbooker, things like that, the way you layer the wording, you know, you put it on top of other things, you bed it in with the bordering, that's all bringing your old history and your old experiences into new ways of working. If you're an embroiderer or a sewer, maybe doing some like slow stitching or symbols stitching. One of my symbols is the plus sign. You could easily do that as like a cross stitch very easily, and it would look amazing. So bringing all the bits of your history, you know, you've probably got, if you're a sewer, you've got all sorts of thread sitting there. Bring that into your work. If you're a card maker or a scrapbooker, you've probably got cardstock and scrapbooking papers and, you know, eyelets and all that sort of stuff that we used to use. Bring some of that in if you need to feel connected, to feel more true to you. It's about what feels nice. That's part of why I like the texture in this card that I added. It was actually the feeling of putting it on as well, not just the feeling when it's dry and you rub your hands over it, but the physical application of it. There's a pleasure in doing that process, and to feel connected to your work. I honestly think the feeling that you get as you make it isn't just about adding a particular symbol, adding a particular color, adding a particular word that you connect with. It's also about the physicality, the physical process of making your work and how it feels as you apply the paint. A friend of mine cannot stand painting with her fingers. She has to use a brush, whereas I tend to use my hands a lot. I use a credit card, you know, old credit card a lot. So it's the physicality of how you work, not just the end result, not just an obvious symbol or an obvious color for your color palette. It's also the physical feeling you get when you make and what gives you pleasure in the way you make. So just because all your friends love painting with a paintbrush, if you love working with your hands and like smearing the paint on like this, do it. I've got friends who love watercolor, and I just won't go down that lane with that particular supply because I know it's not my cup of tea. So keep that in mind as well. Don't be swayed by how your friends work. Do what feels natural for you. Do what feels true for you. Like that word truth keeps coming back over and over and over. And it's not just the symbols that are true or the story you're telling that's true. It's even how you work that has to feel true and honest. So I hope that's sort of given you a few ideas on not just symbols, but also colour palettes, how to start figuring out your colour palettes, and also the physicality of how you work, and understanding that that's part of your symbology or your signature way of working, your sort of sacred way of honouring how you be creative. And I hope you've really liked this video. Thanks, bye.